Doopy doopy doo. Doop doop. Doopy doopy doo. Doop doop. Doopy doopy doo. Doopy doopy doo. Doopy doopy doo. Doopy doopy doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doopy doopy doo. Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right. Welcome, guys, to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Welcome back, guys. I hope you had a really great weekend. I don't know about you, but I am getting ready for the Super Bowl. I'm excited. I love the Super Bowl. I love football, but it is what it is. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. Welcome, guys. We have interesting things to discuss tonight. We will do call in tonight as well. I'm pretty sure you guys want to chat at least about one of these stories. But first and foremost, let's go ahead and give shout outs to people in the chat. What's up, folks? Shout out to David, says Sabby. Rachel Maddow is going to have a meltdown because of Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin. I could see that happening. People are already melting down. Shout out to Western Civic. Thank you, RBN and Sabby. The latest LNNR just dropped. Thank you for that. And this is from the Yellow Vest. Shout out to Vicious Pixie. How can someone be a traitor for interviewing a person who is only an enemy in the minds of psychopaths who call themselves our leaders? I don't know, but I took a peek at that poll. I think you might be interested to see the results when we get to that story. Shout out to Asunta. Hello, chat. Can't wait till 7. What's going on, Mastermind, who's a Sabby member? I'm so BDS that whenever I go to Kroger's, I divide the Sabra hummus into a 2-dip solution. You guys got jokes tonight. Oh boy. Shout out to Jeremiah, says, oh boy, this is going to be great. Greetings, Hannah, says, I'll be listening. Shout out to Golden Monarch, says, Jesse Sellout Ventura endorses Bitcoin Zionist grifter RFK Jr. So, I haven't looked into that just yet. I did see Hardlands Media had that posted that they were going to cover that story earlier this morning. I haven't had a chance to check that out yet, so I'll have to watch Kit's coverage on that. That is interesting. Shout out to Randy, who is a Sabby member, says, good evening, comrades. Shout out to UBIK. I voted. I'm not sure. And you know what? I have mad respect for those of you who say that you're not sure. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing to be afraid of about that here. Shout out to CBC Voter, says, happy Tuesday, Sabby Sabs. Greetings, Gup1, says BDS and amazing.com free Palestine. Thank you for that. Shout out to Larez, says, bonjour, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Not a traitor. Those who picked yes must watch a lot of CNN. Biden won South Carolina primary, but turnout was 4% for a primary. They moved to first. Smash the like, y'all. We'll get into that tonight. Shout out to Red 6, says, hello, Sabby. Happy Tuesday. Shout out to Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says, Shaka when the walls fell. Greetings. Make sure I don't want to. Jacqueline. What's up, Jacqueline, who's a Sabby member, says, hi, everyone. And Jacqueline also says, hey to me and Mastermind Hour, Larez, and Golden Monarch. What's going on, Gamer, who's a Sabby member, says, hello. Hello, is it me you're looking for? I can see it in your eyes. It's actually a stalker song. If you watch the video, the music video of Lionel Richie, he's actually stalking a student. I don't know if that would go well today. I just don't know. Shout out to Kenman says, love Sabby. Shout out to Eric T. Red, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, hello to one and all. What's going on? Julia says, hiya all. Greetings, Cloudness. Sabby Sabs podcast is on the air. Salute. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Salute. And shout out to Nikki's World says, hello, everyone. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into it. I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. They're hanging in there. Sabbies. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Gary and Chris. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate that. You guys will have to bear with me a little bit tonight. I have a new mic and I'm trying to get used to not having that mic that was like right here and it was kind of high. And so I had to kind of do like this. So now it's weird because there's nothing right here. And so, yeah, I can kind of move my head around a little bit more. Anyway, let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll tell you what we are discussing tonight. Taco Tuesday in the house. Taco Tuesday in the house. All right, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are discussing Tucker Carlson in Russia. Dun, dun, dun. You'll see there is a picture of Putin next to Tucker Carlson. Why is Tucker Carlson in Russia? Is he trying to interview Putin? I have all the scoop for you here. I'm glad I waited to cover this story today because more information has been released this morning. We're also going to discuss Killer Mike arrested. That's right. That's Killer Mike there. He's a rapper, a part of a group called Run the Jewels or something like that. Yeah, Run the Jewels. But he also raps by himself. I think he's an underrated rapper. He's also organizer. But we're going to get into what happened to Killer Mike at the Grammys. We're also going to discuss Bari Weiss loses censorship case. And the gentleman there in the picture next to Bari Weiss, that is David Miller, Professor David Miller. That is a good news story we are bringing your way tonight. Good news for David Miller. And we're also going to discuss Biden wins South Carolina. And I'm going to tell you why mainstream media should not be celebrating this the way that they are. And we're going to cover that last ballot measure for the Colorado 2023 ballot measure results. And we will do call-in tonight. Start us off right by hitting the like. Go ahead and smash that like button, guys. Thank you so much. That helps me with the algo. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our first story. Professor David Miller. He is a professor at Bristol University in the UK. He is one of the faculty members that has been targeted since October 7th. One of the faculty members that is in support of the pro-Palestinian protest. And of course, as you can imagine, Bari Weiss was very much cheerleading this on, like she's cheerleaded on more cancellation and censorship of other people as well. But last night, David Miller actually received some good news. Now, this is not the final result, but it is a first step in the right direction. So I want to give a shout out here to Mint Press News because I saw it from them first, folks. I saw it from them first. Says here that David Miller wins his case against Bristol University as a judge rules that he was discriminated against for his anti-Zionist views. This landmark ruling has established that anti-Zionist views are to be protected in the workplace. And here's just a little snippet here of a conversation between David Miller and Loki. Listen to this.
The case I'm making is that I've been discriminated against on the grounds of my anti-Zionist views. That's it. That if I'd had different views which were controversial, that I wouldn't have been sacked. That it was because that my views were anti-Zionist that the university decided to get itself in the position where it would fire me. One of the key things we're doing is we're trying to say that anti-Zionist views should be protected under the Equality Act. As a number of cases recently have shown, there are key areas where political views should not be used to have people sacked, and we're hoping to establish that for anti-Zionist views, which would be a significant achievement, and it would be very difficult to sack people who are supportive of Palestine in the future. The case I'm
Okay, so this is very, very important. I'm so glad that they ruled in David's favor, because this isn't just about pro-Palestinian rhetoric. This is also about the overall issue of censorship. And if you remember, it was just a couple months ago where Congress was passing legislation that anti-Zionism actually equaled anti-Semitism. And I told you I was very concerned about that because those are not the same. And I felt like that was a way to suppress the protests that were all across the globe. So let's get into this story again. We're starting off with a good news story. I'm so happy for Professor Miller. And this is from Press TV. It says, university professor sacked for anti-Zionist views wins discrimination case. And that's David Miller there. Let's go ahead and dive in. I'm actually just going to make this a tad bit bigger, the text, however they do it. A sociology professor sacked by the University of Bristol over his anti-Zionist comments has won a landmark decision by an employment tribunal, which decided that he was discriminated against because of his beliefs. In its judgment on Monday, the Bristol Employment Tribunal ruled that Professor David Miller's anti-Zionist beliefs qualified as a philosophical belief, which is protected under the Equality Act of 2010. It added that Miller was subject to direct discrimination because of his anti-Zionist views. And it has the message here from Mint Press News that said the judge ruled in his favor. It goes on to say, Ram Lowe, who represented Miller at court, called the judgment a significant triumph, establishing that anti-Zionist beliefs are legally protected in the workplace. This is huge. Again, like I said, Congress was passing legislation basically saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So this case in itself, even though it happened in the UK, this case, in my opinion, sets a precedent against Zionism. Professor Miller successfully claimed discrimination based on his philosophical belief that Zionism is inherently racist, imperialist, and colonial, which is a protected characteristic under the Equality Act of 2010, alongside a finding of unfair dismissal. The judgment establishes for the first time ever that anti-Zionist beliefs are protected in the workplace. And let me tell you something, guys. If they're establishing that anti-Zionist beliefs are protected in the workplace, it's only a matter of time before they're protected at the universities as well. So this is why this is so significant. It goes on to say here, I'm extremely pleased that the tribunal has concluded that I was unfairly and wrongfully dismissed by the University of Bristol. I am also very proud that we have managed to establish that anti-Zionist views qualify as a protected belief under the UK Equality Act. Professor Miller was fired by the University of Bristol in October 2021 after he made statements about the role of the Zionist movement in promoting Islamophobia. phobia. So again, huge win for David Miller. Now, last night, after this was announced, like this was like breaking news last night, and then everybody was like, holy crap, right? There was a Twitter space with Professor David Miller, and I want you to hear some of what he had to say in reference to this case. Like I said before, this is a first step in the right direction for David. There's still more to do. Listen to what David said here.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm jubilant. Yes, there's a sigh of relief, but look, this is not over. This is a staging post in a long, long journey. And, you know, what happened to me, has happened to many, many other people. And what happened to me was that the Zionists tried to destroy me. They tried to destroy my career. They tried to destroy my ability to earn a living. And they tried to destroy my reputation globally. And to some extent, they have succeeded in some of that.
Okay, so listen to what he just told you. He said they tried to destroy his career and his reputation. This is what I was talking about when I mentioned the Zionist playbook. They'll come after your career. They'll come after your reputation. This is what we saw happen with Bill Ackman and Claudine Gay. Remember, I told you it wasn't really about the plagiarism because Bill's own wife was criticized for plagiarism as well in her dissertation at MIT. So it wasn't really about that. It was about the fact that she did not move as quickly as Bill Ackman wanted her to do in reference to the protest. And then also, it was also a part of the argument to mention that Jewish people should also be included in the DEI programs. So that's why I think that this case here is phenomenal. Let's continue. He said a little bit more.
And so what we see, of course, is that this is, of course, a stressful process, but it's not just a question of the legal process, which we'll talk about this evening, I think, but also the way in which this is the whole person they're trying to destroy. They're trying to make sure that I will never be able to speak again and that no one will listen to me. Now, tonight, of course, we are at a point along the way where they have failed. And you can see in the response that there has been on social media to the outcome of the tribunal that they have massively, massively failed.
So they have massively, massively failed, he said. This is a loss for Zionism. That's why this is so huge, you guys. And they've been continuing to lose along the way. They lost in reference to the protest, right? They thought that they could push against the governments to make them ban the protest. That didn't happen. Now, they may have had some type of win with Claudine Gay, but it kind of backfired on Bill Ackman because then his wife was outed for plagiarism, right? So the hypocrisy there. They have lost in the media space. Obviously, not just independent media, but mainstream media. So much to the point where even CNN had to prove and actually had to quote that the IDF actually was not able to show evidence that the tunnel was actually underneath a cemetery. In fact, CNN actually pointed to a map and showed that the cemeteries were over here and the tunnel was over here. So it wasn't even underneath the cemetery. So they have lost in the eyes of mainstream media as well.
Crying and wailing and gnashing in from Zionist quarters. The Board of Deputies are crying. The Community Security Trust is crying. But so far, they don't really know how to respond to this because this is absolutely not what they thought would happen or even what they thought was possible. So yes, relief and yes, jubilation. But you know, we're not finished with this process yet. We still have to go through a process of determining what kind of damages I will get. And then, of course, we have to go through the question of whether there's an appeal or not. And we can talk about all that in some detail. But that would be my summary answer to your question about relief.
Okay, so they still have to go through the discussion of whether or not he's going to have like some type of like compensation. That's the other thing. Because he was fired, I'm pretty sure they'll be able to argue that he needs to be compensated for the time that he missed. Sorry, the time that he was not paid for. But there's more because Bari Weiss was behind this. Now, Z Squirrel, you got to love this account. You got to love it. 1 second. Sorry, guys. I got over the cold, but I still have that lingering cough and it's annoying. Okay. The Z Squirrel account. Follow this account, okay? Bari Weiss, who murdered Rifat Alarir by putting a kill target on him in an active genocide zone, made herself very rich pretending to love free speech as she kept demanding the firing of anyone critical of Israel, like David Miller. He just won his court case against the firing. And I want to show you screenshots here. So there was a tweet here from Bari Weiss that said, tomorrow night, 9:30 p.m., join Clubhouse with real leaders of the Jewish community. If you don't know the names, there's Isaac DeCostrog, Blake Flayton, and Sabri Son Miller, Mac Price, and Rose Rich. You should. So Z Squirrel said, here's the punchline to this tweet. That Sabrina Miller person that Bari Weiss is praising has started a campaign to get a professor at her university fired for his political views. Guess what those views are? Yep, he's pro-Palestine. Remember, Bari hates cancel culture, LMAO. Yeah, that was one of her things. And then this image here, solidarity, this is from Bari Weiss, solidarity with all Jewish students at Bristol University, especially the very clever Sabri Son Miller. So we all know Bristol University, that was the university that Professor Miller was fired from. And it goes on to say here, she retweeted this called Stand With Us. It says, watch, anti-Semitism crisis at Bristol University. We speak to one of the students calling out anti-Semitism on campus, Sabrina Miller. Hashtag hate off campus. And there's another screenshot here. The electronic intifada, Israel lobby demands firing of professor who opposes Zionism. So again, notice how Bari Weiss and the Sabrina person, not me. Notice how they were able to move in such a way on social media and make the call for the Israeli lobby to come after this professor. These are very powerful people. Very powerful people. They will try to end you if they can. And then Z Squirrel has the screenshot here that says Bristol University professor David Miller sacked over Israel comments. So you see the chain of events. We saw this also with Bill Ackman, right? All it took was for one Zionist to make the call on social media. And it's almost like, I don't want to call it a mating call, but it kind of gives that impression where it's almost like one person sounds the alarm and they all just swarm in and say, okay, let's go after this person. That's what it seems like, right? So Z Squirrel goes on to say the campaign against David Miller, because he dared use his free speech to criticize the genocidal Israeli occupation regime, was astounding. Multiple investigations cleared him, but they still went ahead with firing him. Bari Weiss leading the charge. And you'll see here, Z Squirrel was retweeting a post that they had from 2021 that said David Miller, a professor at Bristol University, is about to be fired due to a deranged witch hunt started by far-right pro-Israel creeps with backing of over 100 members of parliament and the Tory government. No one in OMG cancel culture crowd cares. Okay, so that's significant. They go on to say the mayor of the city, MPs from all parties, every media outlet from The Guardian to the right-wing rags like the Daily Mail, along with the entire genocidal Zionist Israeli lobby propaganda apparatus and network with Bari Weiss again at the center, united to destroy him. Now, and then this is the post here. UK professor suffered discrimination due to anti-Zionist beliefs, tribunal rules. So notice how they were able to rally not just the MPs, but also the media. They were able to rally the media against David Miller. And I told you the media is one of the most powerful tools that you can do, that you can use. One of the things we said before, right, when we talked about like Bernie Sanders campaigns, the media heavily smeared him. It's very powerful. This time around, though, when it comes to Israel and Gaza, the media has not been able to break through because the protests are continuing and people are not buying it. Now, it goes on to say, let me go back here. Come down here. Congratulations, tracking power, and thank you for standing firm against these depraved, genocidal liars and creeps in the media and political and Zionist Israel lobby and propaganda network. You have been vindicated, and that scumbag killer Bari Weiss has been exposed again. So, Bari Weiss obviously is one of the more powerful tools. But I also want you to hear from someone who is a former agent of Mossad. And I want you to hear him explain to you how the Zionist propaganda machine works. Listen to this.
Now, I know what they do because I used to ask them to do it. I mean, when I was in the Mossad and we had a guy that gave us problems in the U.S., and he was speaking out, and he was talking like Pete talked once and said, Israel is bombing Lebanon with cluster bombs. We say, hey, who's that guy? You know, Pete Makaki, we used to call him. Yeah, which is Pete the cockroach. Because he makes a lot of noise and you can't get rid of him. So what you do is you get in touch with a guy in the station in New York or in the station in Washington. You say, tell the guys at B'nai B'rith to label him.
Okay, so you guys hear what he's saying? His name is Victor Ostrovsky. He is a former agent of Mossad, and he's telling you how the Zionist machine worked because he was a part of it. So if he wanted to shut down someone in the US, he would contact a certain press network and say, label this person. He's letting the cat out the bag. This is how they work, guys. This is what I was trying to tell you. First, they turn the press against you. That's all they need to do is turn the press against you. And then eventually other people will follow. This is exactly what they tried to do in reference to the protests, the pro-Palestinian protests. They tried to turn the press against the protesters fighting for the Palestinian people. Only this time it didn't work. So they've been trying all other types of propaganda. The stories about mass sexual assault, which has been debunked. They had no evidence. They're trying everything that they can. Listen to what else he says.
And of course the campaign starts, and before you know it, the guy's labeled. And he's an anti-Semite. Because that's what we say he is.
You see that, guys? So he said, we label him as an anti-Semite. And before you know it, that's what he's labeled as because that's what we labeled him. When I tell you these people are incredibly powerful, it's a machine. And one of the other machines we've talked about before in the show is like the Democratic Party, right? The DNC, the GOP. These are all machines. And they're well-oiled machines. They know how to function. They've been doing this for a long time. And they know what to say to get the gears moving. So he's letting you know all they have to do is label you as such and then get the press to label you as such. And there you go. They will ruin you.
And that's one stain you cannot wash. Now, it shames me as a Jew to tell you that. But that's the fact. And it's wrong.
Ah, so you heard what he said? He said it shames him to tell you that. But that's the fact. That gentleman's name is Victor Ostrovsky. He is a former Mossad agent. Very, very telling, right? But kudos and shout out to David Miller, because like I said, it's a first step. But the good news is they have ruled that he was discriminated against, and that is incredibly important. All right. Let me go to some of the comments here. Oh, I went to the wrong one. Yes, Liana says they're connected. That's right, Liana. They are connected. Richie says it is a business. Yes, yes, yes. David says propaganda is a hell of a drug. Yes, it is. You know, and Americans, we really are the most propagandized people in the world, because if you travel to other countries, you will see they don't buy into a lot of the propaganda that we buy into. Leroy says we are the most effectively propagandized country in the world. Yes, 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 yes. So if you see David Miller on Twitter, give him a congrats. Stop by his page and say kudos, because I really feel like this is a significant win. And I bet Bari Weiss is just fuming somewhere. I bet she's sitting and she's like, can't take it. Can't take it. All right. What was that, Dave? Dave said, be afraid, be very afraid. Yeah. Golden Monarch says those machines Sabby push fossil fuels, cryptocurrency, Zionism, corporate media smears, and bigoted hate. Thank you so much for that. Okay. If you just joined, go ahead and make sure you answer that poll question. The results looked a little interesting before I went live, but I'm curious to see what people think about this interview or possible interview that Tucker could be having. We are moving on to our next story here. I'm sure all of you heard this, but Joe Biden has officially won the South Carolina primary. Duh. I mean, like, we all knew that this was going to happen. But what was interesting to me is the way that mainstream media is bragging about this as if Joe Biden just won the Olympics or something. Couple of problems here. Number one, it's South Carolina. We know South Carolina in the general election is going to be a red state. I lived in South Carolina. It's not turning blue anytime soon. I can tell you that much. Two, they're bragging about this regardless of the fact that Joe Biden was the incumbent. Yes, he had two challengers. He had Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips as a challenger, but they're bragging about this as though they actually had debates. They actually gave press attention to all of his challengers repeatedly. They've actually given more attention to the third party candidates than they have Marianne and Dean Phillips, I would say, right? But they're bragging about it. They're like, yes, look how much he won by. But there's something that they leave out, and I'm going to break this down for you tonight. We're going to look at a little bit of a case study because I did a little bit of research because I was a little curious. But we're going to start with this excitement here from MSNBC. They said, wow, he's getting 97%. Holy smokes, guys. Can you believe this? Can you believe it? They were acting like this was actually a general election, and they were acting like they actually gave his challengers a fair competition. Listen to this.
You're wondering, if you get the same day, would there be any variance? Would that bring the Biden number down? Clearly, it really isn't. Biden's running at 97% statewide. 25% in here. Williamson, Phillips haven't even touched 2%. I mean, I could individualize this county by county, but there really isn't any variance here county by county. We are seeing this, you know, we're talking about the issue of black voter enthusiasm and the core Democratic base for Biden. He's getting 97% in heavily black counties. He's getting 97% in some of the whitest counties, in the whitest counties of the state. It's just across the board here with really no geographical variance. In terms of turnout, you're wondering if you get the.
Okay, so let me jump in here for just a second. So they're bragging about this because at that point he was at 96.7%. And they're like, oh my God, he said Williamson and Dean Phillips barely touched 2%. It's South Carolina. This is exactly why they wanted South Carolina to be the first state. Because they knew, remember, South Carolina is the state that changed the race in the Democratic primary in 2020. Bernie Sanders won Nevada. He won New Hampshire. There's argument about Iowa. But then it got to South Carolina and everything changed. Joe Biden won South Carolina which is what they expected to happen. That is why the Democratic Party decided to make South Carolina the first state in the primary. Now, New Hampshire and Iowa ignored that, and they went ahead and held, their primaries anyway. But this is why they made that switcheroo, because they wanted to try to show, oh, there's a lot of Black people in South Carolina. We'll show that Black voters want Joe Biden. And plus, this is the state that helped him in 2020. So they're really running around bragging about this. I would argue, although none of these people are my candidate, I would vote for any of these people, but I would argue this. If they had actual debates, I would argue that Marianne and Dean would have been higher percentage-wise than they were. The media tried their best to make sure that you really didn't know about them. I can tell you because my parents are retired in South Carolina, and I have friends in South Carolina. They didn't even know these people were running. And they didn't vote in the primary, but they didn't know Marianne Williamson was running. They didn't know Dean Phillips was running. All they knew is that Joe Biden was the nominee. And the reason why they don't know those things, why would that be, guys? Why? Media blackout and no debates, which is exactly what the Democratic Party wanted. Now there's more. Because the way they were bragging about this, and then you have Jamie Harrison coming up, the Black Boule. He's part of the Black Boule. Listen to what he says. This is really telling.
Those folks who were in bondage, the progeny of the folks who picked cotton. Now those folks won't be picking cotton, but will be picking presidents. Those folks who were in bondage, the progeny of the folks who picked cotton. Now those folks won't be picking cotton, but will be picking presidents.
So let me explain what's wrong with Jamie's statement there. It's 2024. Jamie Harrison is basically saying, like, we went from being slaves in this country to picking presidents. He's talking about this as if this is the very first time that Black people have voted for a presidential candidate, right? So the pandering. Jamie Harrison is the DNC. He's the chair of the DNC. You have to remember that he ran against Lindsey Graham. Remember that little competition? I knew he wasn't going to win, but he was rewarded by that from the Democratic Party by making him chair of the DNC. He is status quo. He is very much establishment. He is not progressive in any way, shape, or form. But here he is. He's going to sit here and talk about picking cotton. But when a Black woman approached him at one of his own speaking engagements and questioned him about reparations for African-American freedmen in this country, Jamie Harrison ran off the stage. But you want to stand up here and you want to talk about picking cotton. It's laughable. It's absolutely laughable. And what's also bad about this, he is giving Black people in the audience the impression that this is a significant win for the Black community. It's not. Joe Biden isn't doing anything for the African-American community. He hasn't done anything before except incarcerate you, work with segregationists, tell you he didn't want his kids to grow up in a racial jungle, refusing to let Anita Hill's witnesses testify against Clarence Thomas. That's what Joe Biden has done for the Black community. But you have people that are part of the Black Boule, like Jamie Harrison, and they're there to keep the status quo, but to make you believe you're getting a win. One of the greatest tools of white supremacy is to use Black people to do it for you. Jamie Harrison is one of those people. This is why we'll never progress the way that I think that we could in this country, because we have sellouts like Jamie Harrison that are always there to hold the community back as a whole and push for the establishment. That's Jamie Harrison. If you look at the people in the audience, let's go back. Let me show you. See, look at the audience here, folks. Look at this. So you got Miss Senior 2023, Miss Sophomore. Let's see, did he show the Greek life yet? Let me see if we got to them yet. Okay, let me keep on. I'm trying to show you who he's speaking to so you understand who is actually buying into this. She might be at the end. Okay, so you see this? Okay. Notice a lot of older people here. There's a couple of young people mixed in, but a lot of older people. And then where's her right there? There we go. The Greek life organizations. These are the ones that hold the Black community back and keep us embedded in a two-party system that is not going to benefit us. So this is what they pull from. Clyburn, I told you, he pulls from the Black church and he pulls from the Black Greek organizations. That's where they get their votes from. That's who's voting. Now, let me tell you what they're not mentioning. This part is interesting. The turnout. Who came out to vote? I think this is very important, don't you? Don't you think this is important? So I was laughing here. Biden won the South Carolina primary with a 4% voter turnout, not something for the DNC to brag about. And you can see I put this clip here. South Carolina primary voter turnout for 2024, around 131,000 South Carolinians voted in the 2024 Democratic primary, making up just around 4% of registered voters statewide. The showing marks the lowest turnout in the last few presidential primaries for Democrats, though those contests were notably more competitive. Why were they more competitive? Because those candidates received media attention and probably because there were debates. I'm going to show you an example of one that might take some of you back. And for some of you that are younger, it may be new to you. 4%, ladies and gentlemen. Now, some people have argued with me. They said, oh, well, it was a primary and he was the incumbent. Yeah. But I have an example to show you that may show you how things have changed. Keep this number in the back of your head, 131,000 South Carolinians. Hold on to that. Eric, if we can put that in the chat, 131,000. So people can hold on to that. Because, yes, there was an incumbent, and I totally get that. But the reality is, the reason why the turnout was so low is because people are not excited about Joe Biden. So mainstream media wants to brag and say that he got that 97%, but then they don't want to tell you how many people actually showed up to vote. I just told you, everyone that I talked to in South Carolina, they didn't go to vote. They didn't even go. Like some of them told me, they said, oh, if I knew someone else was running, maybe I would have. Right? Let's do a comparison. I went back to a Democrat primary that was actually competitive. We're going back to 1980, folks. I wasn't even born, but some of you were. And you may remember this, 1980, and I'm going to show you the difference. And I'll show you why they didn't want to have debates. Democrat primary, Jimmy Carter versus Ted Kennedy. Now, Ted Kennedy, of course, is one of the Kennedys. We got a lot of things to say about Ted. We've talked about some of the things that Ted has done on this show. But for the sake of this segment, let's focus on the primary. Now, you remember Jimmy Carter was the incumbent at that point in time. Ted Kennedy decided to primary challenge Jimmy Carter because he didn't feel that Jimmy was doing a good job. Similar to Marianne and Dean Phillips primary challenging Joe Biden. I want to show you the difference. If we scroll down here, we're just going to take a look at the chart. And I think I'm going to zoom out just to, oh yeah, you guys can see this, right? Okay. Jimmy Carter, he won 36 states, 36, right? But watch this. Ted Kennedy Ted Kennedy won 12 states. Now, some people may see this and think, oh, that's not significant. It is against an incumbent. What kind of I wasn't alive then. So if you were older and you remember, please tell me in the chat. Jimmy Carter apparently had upset enough people to the point where 12 states were willing to vote for his primary challenger. Valerie Ross says, I remember that was back in the day. Yeah. Yeah. Right? Okay. So I want to show you something. Look at the states that Ted Kennedy won. Arizona, Massachusetts, his home state, of course, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, North Dakota, DC, California, New Jersey, New Mexico, Rhode Island, South Dakota. The South Dakota one was interesting. Vermont, Alaska, Michigan. Okay. And then for some reason, they don't list all of Jimmy Carter's states, but I'll show you just a list of it. Obviously, he won the most, 36 states, right? But watch this. Let's go to South Carolina. We're going to scroll down here. Make sure I don't miss it this time. South Carolina. The red is Jimmy Carter. Okay. South Carolina was won by Jimmy Carter. All right. Hold on to that. Because I want to prove a point. Granted, this was the 80s. I want to show you this. And then we're going to go to, one second. Let me show you what page I picked up. I don't know why, but I have the Doug song in my head. Okay, page 30. So, because I want to show you this chart so you can see what the turnout was like. There we go. And one. Okay, for some reason, I don't know why. I'm gonna put it up here. I don't know why, like on my computer, I was able to actually flip this. Eric, can you rotate this document on here? I was able to rotate it on my computer, on my other computer. If not, just let me know. I didn't know if Type VNC had a rotate option. Because if not, I can just do it by sharing my screen. Probably not. Let me do it the other way. Sorry, guys. Because it let me rotate it in Chrome. Okay. Got it. All right. Let me put this up here. Let me come out. Let me share this. Yeah, Chrome lets you rotate. I just saw someone was asking about that. Yeah, it lets you rotate. All right, check this out. Now I'm going to try to zoom. Okay. I don't know how much this you can see, but I want to make sure you see the words. South Carolina voting history and statistics, South Carolina Democratic primary, 1980. Okay. We're just going to scroll to the bottom. These are all the counties. And I want you to see the total turnout. So this second column, total voted, all the way down here. Over 385,000 people. See if I can zoom it in so you can see it. Can you see it now? There you go. 385,539 people showed up for the South Carolina primary of Jimmy Carter versus Ted Kennedy. 385,000 people showed up in a Democrat primary. Now, let's go back. I told you to hold on to that number. 131,000 South Carolinians voted in the Democratic primary in 2024. That's right. Outside In said, and was a lot less people back then. Exactly. That's the point that I'm trying to make. So here's what I'm trying to say, folks. The reason why they were not going to allow people like Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, and anyone else who was primary challenging Joe Biden is because after this race between Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy, even though Ted Kennedy did not win the primary, he did win 12 states. And what people have argued is that his primary challenge against Jimmy Carter did enough damage to the point that Jimmy Carter did not win re-election. He lost to Ronald Reagan. You see why they didn't want to have debates? So it wasn't so much that they would think that Marianne or Dean would actually, beat Joe Biden. It was the fact that if they had debates and gave them enough attention, they could do enough damage to Joe Biden that he could lose re-election. He could still lose to Donald Trump. That's why they didn't want to entertain it. And speaking of that, if we go to this clip here, Simone Sanders interviewed Dean Phillips, and I want you to hear how they spoke to him. This is crazy. Like I said, I wouldn't vote for any of these people, okay? Any of them. I'm not voting Democrat or Republican. I'll be voting third party or independent, right? But listen to the way they speak to Dean Phillips as if, how dare you? How dare you? Listen to this.
You say this as a campaign of principle. If you cannot win, I worked for Senator Sanders in 2015, 2016. Lots of, I like to say I've been where you've been a little bit. And a lot of the arguments that we would make about how Senator Sanders would do in a general election, it was a moot point, because if you cannot win a Democratic primary, you cannot get to a general election. And so what do you say to the fact that, yes, in New Hampshire, what you got about 19%, but the Democratic primary in South Carolina is a test of how primarily Black voters feel about you. And you cannot be the Democratic nominee without Black voters. And so Black voters, they didn't come out and say, we're interested in Dean Phillips. So what is your path? Because coming up next is Nevada. You're not going to Nevada. You set your sights on Michigan. You're not on the ballot, but Nevada is next. And so I don't understand.
Well, first of all, I think I probably have 5.
So let me pause here for just a second and let me tell you what's happening here, right? So notice that she said it's a moot point. But if it was really a moot point, why did Simone Sanders and the rest of mainstream media do their damnedest to make sure that those people were silenced? Why did the DNC refuse to have any debates? Because they knew it actually wasn't a moot point, because using the example that I just gave you with Ted Kennedy and Jimmy Carter, it wasn't a moot point, because the thing is, if they would have treated them fairly, if they would have allowed debates, they could have done enough damage to Joe Biden so that Joe Biden would lose to Donald Trump. And here's the thing. I think Joe Biden's going to lose to Donald Trump regardless. That's the other part. I think he is still going to lose because he has been terrible with the economy, his foreign policy decisions, and Joe Biden obviously has difficulty speaking and knowing where he's at. Listen to what Dean had to say about this.
Percent name recognition right now in the country. No voters know me. In fact, this is my first invitation to your network in 4 months, and I'm grateful to all of you. Sincerely, I mean that. That's my whole point. The GOP has had a competition. They're on TV. They're consuming hundreds of hours of primetime television, debates, town halls. CNN has given every GOP candidate a 1-hour town hall. There's energy on the GOP side. We don't get energy unless there's competition. So when you coronate someone, especially a man like Joe Biden, who I respect, by the way, and I hope you know I respect Joe Biden. But at his stage in life, he is not inspiring people. We have no competition. We're absent on the airwaves. People don't care. You saw the turnout, 4%. And I'm trying to introduce myself. All I'm trying to do is wake up a party that I believe should have spirited competition to introduce a new generation of leaders. And by the way, when I came to Congress in 2019, I wanted Hakeem Jeffries to run right away. We've got to start elevating a young generation. We are so...
I agree that we do have to elevate a young generation, but not a generation of Hakeem Jeffries. He's status quo, he's corporate. There are other people that can be elevated out there. And I think those people should be elevated outside of the two-party system. The next generation that's coming in needs to be people that are running as independents, people that are running as third-party candidates. We need to change the entire system. We should have as many independents in the House of Representatives as we do Democrats, or actually split it. Split it. Obviously, Democrats are still going to, there's some that are still going to be able to hold on to those seats because of the money that is backed behind them. That's just the reality of the situation. Same thing with some of the Republican representatives as well, and senators as well, because they are backed by so much corporate money, and they're also backed by weapon contractors as well. That being said, there is no reason why we should not have at least, I'm going to go low, at least 20 independents in the House and at least 20 third-party candidates in the House. That's 40. And I'm going on the low end here. There's no reason why we should not have that, because Congress is not representative of the rest of the United States. It's really not. A lot of the people are like, they're so, no shade to the older folk, but some of these people need to retire. They kept Dianne Feinstein in there until she was on her last leg and she was not coherent. I think Nancy Pelosi needs to retire. I think Chuck Schumer, I think all these people need to go. And one of the ways to do that is to have term limits. That's how you get some of these people out of there. You start implementing term limits and then they can't be a lifetime congressperson. Let's continue.
Suppressing voters and candidates and debate, and we're not inspiring, and it's time to wake people up. Someone had to do it. In that respect, I'm winning, and I'm going to keep going.
So the chairman in me,
the strategist and the chairman, yes.
The chairman in me says, "What the hell are you doing?"
Sure,
right?
You see this? Now, see, these are the same people that are complaining that we need to have democracy, but then they're going to say to him, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this?" Because again, like I said, they remember what happened with Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy. But these people are telling you, if we get Donald Trump, he's going to destroy our democracy. But you guys don't want democracy either. That's why you're telling people they shouldn't run. That's why you're saying that Joe Biden is the nominee. That's why you wouldn't have debates. They pick these people. And in order to get out of this system where politicians are handpicked, we have to have free public elections in this country. Other countries have this. Get the corporate money out. Get the military industrial complex out, because that's who's picking these people. Barack Obama was chosen by Wall Street. So you just can't. You have to get the corporate money out, and then we can really see fundamental change. But do you see how they just talk to people? What the hell do you think you're doing?
Why are you doing it? Because the reality of it is the party had a chance in 2016 and in 2020 to make a different choice. All right. They did not choose Hillary. And in 2020, they had Joe Biden standing in front of them, and along with an array of other Democratic candidates, including the current vice president, and the party said no. So what makes you think that after that, with an incumbent president, Joe Biden's not going anywhere?
Notice what he said. He said the party said no. What did the people say? Because the majority of Americans don't vote. The majority of Americans stayed home. And that has continued for quite a time. So, you know, he's revealing this here. The party said no. That's all they consider, and that's all they think about. It's all about what is important to the party and then what is important to the donors.
Not stepping down.
Big mistake, by the way. Big mistake.
Matter of opinion, but individuals make their choice.
Sure.
And in the process of making the choice to stay in the game, 97% of that 4% that turned out voted for him. So the question becomes, in reality, are you creating a drain in the process? prolonging the narratives around his age, prolonging the narratives around other things that people are distracted by with Joe Biden, when the real threat is the man across the aisle in Donald Trump. And the polling shows at the end of the day, Donald Trump is going to lose to Joe Biden. Second final point on that. This is 2024. This is not 2016. It's not even 2008.
Right.
Very different race, very different electorate. That's the
2016 is not the best example that I would use in favor of the Democratic Party, because we all know the DNC rigged it against Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. That's why there was the DNC fraud lawsuit. So if I were him, I would not use that as an example.
other thing to keep in mind, that we've already seen an indication from the base of both parties where they want to go in 2022. When democracy and the threat is in front of them, the economy and all the other concerns take a little bit of a back step. So how do you?
No. See, I got to disrupt this and we'll let Dean Phillips. See, this is the problem here. He said the economy takes a backseat. No, the economy never takes a backseat when it comes to voting. Isn't that, let's think about this for a second. One of the reasons that Donald Trump lost in 2020, other than the pandemic and all that jazz that was happening, all that craziness at the time, and because of some of the policy decisions that he made in reference to the border issue and people were like the kids in cages. But again, the media highlighted those things. The media, liberal media, has not been highlighting that kids are still in the cages under President Joe Biden. So you see how this works? So that being said, one of the reasons why he lost is because the economy started to decline during the pandemic. That was one of the things that people started to notice. Oh no, I'm getting laid off. The small businesses are closing because of the lockdowns, et cetera, et cetera. That is one of the things. Right now, if you look at the polls, the number one issue that voters have on their mind is the economy. So these people sitting at the table are fairly wealthy. So for them, the economy may take a back seat. But for working class people that live, especially around here in Boston, the economy is not taking a back seat. When you're working two jobs and you're barely making ends meet, the economy does not take a back seat. When you struggle to afford to pay for childcare because daycares are really expensive now and they continue to increase, the economy does not take a back seat. When you have to sit up there and decide whether or not you're going to pay for your car repairs so that you can get to work, or you're going to pay your light bill so that you have heat in your apartment in the winter, the economy does not take a back seat. These are rich people speaking for working class people, something they know nothing about. And we have to call it out. Let me let Dina respond here.
Sauce all of that narratively going forward, when as you tweet it, you're getting whooped.
Someone's got to do it. My friends, I know every conversation you all have privately. It's probably the same ones I'm having with my colleagues, which is we're dumbfounded. And yes, he's got a commanding lead in the primaries. I get it. But look at the numbers. He is in a terrible position. The
Which
fact
numbers?
that Donald
Can we
Trump,
talk about the numbers? Let's be specific.
Okay, first of all, let's talk about historical approval numbers. He's in the 30s. No one's ever won re-election with numbers like
let's
that.
Talk about the voters.
Let's talk about the seven. Yes. Just forget national numbers. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
See how she wanted to skip ahead and say, let's talk about the vote when he said his approval numbers are in the 30s?
7 battleground states where he is, at least in the last Bloomberg poll, behind in every single one. But here's the bigger issue. We're living in this bubble here in Washington. When you get out around this country, as I've been doing, my goodness, it is shocking. And by the way, I'm going to wake everybody up right now. Donald Trump is listening to people. He gets it. The border chaos is absolutely front and center amongst Democrats who cannot believe that Democrats here in Washington are denying it and have been for years. Costs are
Except they had an opportunity. They had an opportunity.
In the last number of months.
And
Hallelujah,
Republicans
finally.
decided to bungle
it. Of
it.
course. But all I'm saying is that Donald Trump is listening. The man is a disaster for this country. We know it. And he is beating, in every meaningful poll in the battlegrounds, he is beating Joe Biden. And frankly, the country's made up his mind about his age. I'm just going to be forthright with all of you. All the talk about the past, wonderful bills that I voted for and helped market. I was a member of House Democratic leadership, infrastructure bill, CHIPS Act, Inflation Reduction Act, great investments in America. Americans are really suffering right now. 60% living paycheck to paycheck, 40% don't have $400 in the bank. And here we have the president and our party saying GDP growth is up, job growth is great. People are frustrated and they are fearful and they're seeing wars around the world. If we wake up, and my mission is to wake us up, I respect Joe Biden. He should have passed the torch. There are wonderful next generation candidates ready to go. I called them to inspire them. This was not a mission for me, but someone had to do this. And I'm simply saying the quiet part out loud. This is not a mission of antagonism. I'm not pointing out anything, Michael, that is not clear and present and obvious. This notion of encapsulating him, don't debate, don't appear in front of voters, don't do anything unscripted, don't do interviews, don't do town halls. He's going to have to. And when people see it, it's going to be really difficult to overcome. And I only ran for Congress the morning after the 2016 election. My 16-year-old daughter was in her bedroom crying. She had just overcome cancer. She's a gay woman. I didn't know it at the time. I saw fear in her eyes like I'd never seen in my kids' eyes. I had to do something. I promised them I would. I ran for Congress, flipped a 60-year Republican district blue. Beat a guy who won by 14. And I lost.
Okay, so this is Dean basically telling them, look, Joe Biden is a bad idea. This is Dean telling them Joe Biden is going to lose to Donald Trump. That's basically what he's trying to let them know. And yeah, Donald Trump, he's blowing smoke up people's ass too. But the difference is people are getting the impression that he actually cares. And now we've had two. We've had a Biden presidency and we've had a Trump presidency. And some people are looking at their pocketbooks and they're starting to see, you know what? My finances were actually better under President Trump. This is Dean trying to sound the alarm. And I think this is really important for people to hear. Now, in this clip here, I want you to see this. Shout out to Case Study QB. They're talking about the danger from the party in reference to Joe Biden's electability here. Listen to this.
Senior political columnist for Politico, Jonathan Martin. His latest piece is entitled, "Forget No Labels, Biden's Third Party Peril is on the Left." And Jonathan, you write in part this: it's the left that presents the most acute peril to the president. Few in the administration sense the danger more than Vice President Kamala Harris. From holiday parties to a dinner at her residence last month for a group of prominent black men, Harris has been telling sympathetic Democrats outside the White House that she recognizes the political challenge posed by Biden's unwavering public support for Israel. I'm told by officials familiar with her comments at the events. Part of the president's challenge, particularly with younger Democrats deriving their news almost entirely from social media, is they don't hear of Biden pushing Netanyahu behind the scenes. There is a hate the sin, love the sinner element to Biden's approach to Israel that some in Gen Z can't fully grasp.
So, Jonathan, very fascinating. You have most Democrats fearing what's going to happen from no labels and independent candidates. Would you say the danger comes from within Joe Biden's own party?
Well, or the far left folks that would otherwise be Democrats, Joe, but are now sort of radicalized. And Democrats have touched this stove twice in the last quarter century, right? They lost in 2000, of course, in part because of Ralph Nader on the left, and lost in 16 in part because of Jill Stein on the left. And it's a more acute challenge now because you've got a conflict in the Middle East that's galvanizing and radicalizing younger voters and sort of leaving them to say, well, as you know, the old line, Joe, that you know so well, that there's not a dime's worth of difference between the two parties.
There it is. There it is. I told you. The presidency of Donald Trump, followed by a presidency of Joe Biden, has basically shown a lot of people. And by the way, he says young people. It's not just young people. It's shown a lot of people that, guess what? These parties aren't as different as we thought. They're basically divided under small government, big government. And I'd even argue about that with the Democratic Party now, considering how they have moved further to the right. And social issues, right? But it's more so a lot of times those social issues that keep the people divided amongst those parties, right? But now that we have had both, people are able to see, well, hell, Biden is continuing some of Trump's policies. Biden is building onto Trump's border wall. You know, so people are able to see these parties, they're not as different as we may have thought. So should we just leave the system altogether, which I did, or should we just stay at home or get out into the streets and voice our opinion? And a lot of people have been protesting, and it's not just young people. I've covered these protests. There are older people at these protests as well. I've seen whole families. I've seen people bring the entire family with the kids and everything at these protests. So you may see a lot of young people on screen on some of the media networks, but if you actually have gone to some of the pro-Palestinian protests, you'll see there's people of all different ages, of all different races, fighting for humanity. And for me, this is not a Democrat thing. This is not a Joe Biden thing, a Republican thing. It's a humanitarian issue. And that's how I look at it, right? So he's basically saying that the third parties are going to be more of a threat to Joe Biden than, the threat coming from within his own party, than like the Marianne or the Dean Phillips. I would say the biggest threat to Joe Biden is himself. It's his policies. It's a lot of the decisions that he made, reneging on some of the promises that he made to voters. He's his biggest threat.
If younger voters believe that in October of this year, that a vote for Biden is indifferent than a vote for Trump when it comes to the Middle East, that's not going to get them off their couch. And if it does, they're going to pull the lever for Jill Stein or Cornel West or Bobby Kennedy. And I think this is a numbers game, guys, and this is a campaign that's going to be won or lost at the margins. And if Biden loses 30,000 votes in, Ann Arbor, Michigan, or Madison, Wisconsin, that's the election right there.
There it is. There it is. So while the media is hyping up Joe Biden's primary win in South Carolina, which they had already rigged anyway, what should they really be focusing on? Those swing states that Joe Biden is actually losing to Donald Trump. Joe Biden's losing in Michigan. If he loses Michigan, that's a wrap. Now, I want to bring up this point here. They actually interviewed a Black pastor who also brought up the Gaza issue in reference to Joe Biden's reelectability. Listen to this.
What about also voters of color, particularly Black voters, who this president has seen an erosion of support at times? You mentioned a Cornel West, maybe it's RFK Jr. What's the level of concern there? That's not just a third-party candidate could draw away progressives, but also part of what should be considered the Democratic base, Black voters.
Yeah. Well, that's an enthusiasm challenge that is significant that I think the Biden folks recognize they have to work on. But I think it's not totally separate from his challenges on the far left. Talking to Democrats last week for my column, one of the things that stuck out to me was Black pastors starting to criticize Biden on the Middle East. One congressman told me a Black pastor took him aside and said, what's going on with this war in Gaza? Because my parishioners are starting to bring this up. That's a Black church. That's not, the barista in Madison, Wisconsin. So
you hear this? So here's the other thing. Not everyone who is against the war in Gaza is on the far left. I want to go ahead and clear that up. Some people just see this as a humanitarian issue. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily far left, right? Like that. I mean, my daddy isn't far left and he got a problem with this. So just think about that for a second. But now they're telling you, he talked to a Black pastor and he's like, what is going on with this Gaza issue? Because my members of the church have been coming to me and they're venting about this and I need to know what's up.
It's a real challenge, Jonathan, that includes Black voters too.
Jonathan Al Sharpton, when you talk about Black churches and others that have raised the question, and that's clearly the case. I mean, I certainly came out strong when January, October 7th happened, but
Al confused.
Clearly, I'm disturbed with Netanyahu and I'm disturbed what's going on in Gaza. The fact that you are raising this, though, do you think if the Biden campaign made a clear distinction I mean, without trying to have it both ways, that they're not supporting Netanyahu and, in fact, deal with other issues, that this can deal with the enthusiasm question. Because I think some on the far left will be far left, but I think that mainstream black vote that is now questioning, and all of us are saying that there is no real straightforward language on what's going on here.
So let me explain the BS that Al Sharpton is trying to parrot here. If Joe Biden comes forward and says that he's not aligned with Netanyahu and that he doesn't agree with Netanyahu, but he's still funding Israel, does Al Sharpton think we're that dumb? I think you need to give younger people more credit, Al. They're very resourceful. I can tell you from experience working with the younger kids, they are very resourceful. Remember, they're the internet generation. They know how to look things up. But the fact that Al Sharpton is bringing up Netanyahu as the only barrier to this situation is also pretty disingenuous, because Al Sharpton has also been told about the history and how this all started. You can replace Netanyahu with someone else and the Palestinian people will still be occupied and oppressed. So you have to change the actual system that is in place. But he really thinks people are this dumb. Joe Biden, if you just come forward and say you're not in cahoots with Netanyahu, man, we see the money going out the door. We see you still sending weapons to Israel. Isn't Congress voting on this right now to send billions of dollars to Israel again? They really think young people are dumb.
Well, here's the reluctance, Reverend, on that is that the Biden folks are trying to get this moonshot deal in the Middle East. And I think to do that, you can't really come out against Netanyahu because they're trying to get a deal with the Israelis and the Saudis.
Let me correct him. You can't come out and you can't condemn Netanyahu, not necessarily because you're trying to get a deal. They can't condemn Netanyahu because they belong to the Israeli lobby. I told you and showed you this before. You look on Open Secrets, Joe Biden has taken the most money from the Israeli lobby going all the way back to 1990. He's taken over $4 million. That is why they're not going to openly condemn Netanyahu. There are too many members sitting up in Congress and sitting up in the Senate that have been bought and paid for and protected by the Israeli lobby.
In which there would be some path toward a two-state solution. You would also get a security deal between the U.S. and the Saudis would recognize Israel as a state. And I think if you're going to get that kind of deal, it's a long shot, obviously. You can't really cut ties with the current prime minister of Israel during negotiations. But there's
No, you can't cut ties when the money is the tie. It's not about making no damn deal. It's about the money that is tied to it and the interest of the state of Israel. That's what this is about. Why do you guys think JFK said that AIPAC back then, it should register as a foreign agent? That came from JFK. And you see what happened to him. So there you go. That was never implemented. Joe Biden right now, regardless of his win in South Carolina, is losing to Donald Trump. This is crazy, man. This is crazy. I want you to show him the approval rating. This is whack. Wiggity, wiggity, whack.
Let's just start with the bottom line. When you ask folks, hey, if it's the general election and it's Trump versus Biden, in our poll, Donald Trump now leads Joe Biden by 5 points. Compare that to the last time we polled back in November. Trump was ahead then, but it was only by 2 points. It's even more significant when you look at it this way. Over time, we have been testing for 5 years now, going back to 2019, a Biden-Trump matchup. Remember, 2019, 2020, Joe Biden led. He led big in every single one of our polls. For the first time in November, Donald Trump pulled ahead in our poll, and now at 5 points, this is the biggest lead NBC has ever had in 16 polls for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. And of course,
but Joe Biden won 97% of the vote in South Carolina. You see why that's not the win that they're telling you that it is? This is embarrassing. If I was Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, you guys should be embarrassed. Obama and Hillary Clinton, both of you should be embarrassed Okay. Hillary, you should be embarrassed for losing to Donald Trump in the first damn place. How you lose how you do that bad, Hill? How you do that bad? Your husband was president. He didn't tell you about the game. He didn't tell you about how to win over the Rust Belt, or did he tell you and you just chose not to listen? So there's that. Obama, you need to be embarrassed too. You need to be embarrassed with both of them because you propped up Hillary Clinton and then she lost to Donald Trump. And then you pushed and promoted Joe Biden, told people to drop out the race to help Joe Biden win in 2020. And then it looks like he's about to lose to Donald Trump in 2024. How you do that, huh? How you make that happen?
Undergirding all of this is this question of he is the incumbent, Joe Biden. We ask voters, what do you think of the job he's doing? And look at that, Kristen, 37% approve and now 60% disapprove.
And we should say that is the lowest approval rating since former President George W. Bush's second term.
Yeah, and it's put that in further context, too. Bush in his second term wasn't running for re-election. Yeah. Here's the presidents who were running for re-election in our poll starting their re-election year. What was their approval rating? Bush was over 50. He won. Obama was almost at 50. He won. Trump 4 years ago was 46. He lost. Look how low Biden's number is compared to those predecessors.
Pay attention to these numbers, guys. Nobody has won with this approval rating. Remember that come November.
At this point,
their numbers all much bigger than President Biden's.
It shows you the improvement Biden has to make here in the coming months. The issues that are driving this, too, the economy, no surprise, we've been talking about it, but look at that advantage for Trump, 22 points and securing the.
You see this? Dealing with the economy, Donald Trump, 55%, Joe Biden, 33%. You guys see this? But the gentleman in the other clip told you that the economy gets pushed to the back burner. I told you the economy is always usually the number one thing. Then they're securing the border. 57% Donald Trump, 22% Joe Biden. Man, what an embarrassment.
Border here, folks, a very important Trump with a 35-point advantage.
The economy is so striking, Steve, because jobs are up, inflation is down. Voters aren't giving him credit for that, clearly.
No, the economy numbers are not striking because if you've been paying attention, just because there's an increase of jobs and they don't tell you what the jobs are. They don't tell you if they're full-time, part-time, contract, temp. A lot of these new roles, at least in Massachusetts, are gig positions that don't include benefits. So there's that. But again, these are people who are not paying attention to those kitchen table issues because they don't have to. These people are pretty well off. If you go out and actually talk, you guys leave that damn studio and you go out and actually talk to working class people on the street, you'll understand why the polling is the way that it is in reference to the economy under Joe Biden. Last year alone, did you guys know this? This was reported by CNBC. Last year, layoffs increased by 98%. 98%. This is why I told you it's a lie when they say the economy is doing well. I don't know how often you guys go to the grocery store. I go once a week because I usually buy items that are perishable items. I buy a lot of fruit, vegetables, that kind of stuff. I usually go stop in there once a week and grab a little bit of something. The grocery store prices are still high. So you're not fooling us.
Yeah, there are a couple areas in here, I think, where Democrats see potential opportunities to grow Biden's support. Certainly, they are hoping the economy, folks change their perceptions of it and start rewarding Biden for it. That's what they're hoping, certainly.
So winning South Carolina doesn't really mean much, son. Doesn't really mean much. Let's go to some of the comments here. Lots of things to pull up. Bench music. You don't have to go that far back. The second time Obama ran, he was unopposed in the primary and got 24% out of South Carolina. Yes, I saw that. I went further back, though, because I wanted people to see someone who was opposed, right? But yeah, you're right, 24%. And thank you for this as well. Jimmy became a great man. His campaign was accused of running a racist campaign. Jimmy Carter? I'll have to look into that. Jay Evie says Carter ran on smaller government equals less social programs. He was anti-union and a deregulator. No, Jimmy C was not a great man. They created the myth after the fact. I guess I got some more research to do about Jimmy. Mad Dog says Jimmy Carter was vicious and destroyed lives. Well, damn. Thank you for the super chat, Eric. No good Joe Biden is most definitely losing in 2024. I'm voting for Trump 2024. Why are you voting for Trump, Eric? Tell us in the chat. Why are you voting for Trump? Why not break the chain and vote third party? Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Carter's first term deregulated airlines, effectively busting their unions, and was targeting transport in his second term. It would have busted the Teamsters union. That's why they voted against him. Ooh, I might have to do another show about this. That is interesting. Thank you, Janice. Tim said, hey, Sabby, I'm an old ninja, and I agree we need some grassroots young blood in the wild body politics. Thank you, Bullet the Bunny. What do you think about a modern constitutional Congress to reshape this country as it is? Something creative with a delegate lottery for each state. I am always open to new ideas and suggestions in reference to the system. Bullet the Bunny. Zach says, I have never seen people this angry. People are either not voting or voting for Trump. That's what I've been hearing from a lot of people too. Thank you, Sparky. Great work, Sabby. Thank you for this as well. Denazify Israel. Thank you, none of your business. 1,000 black pastors sent a letter to Biden to stop the war. Yeah, I heard about that as well. Thank you for this, Sparky. Go Yemen, fight the power. And thank you for this one as well. Build a better world with bricks. Thank you, New York. So Peter Arnett of CNN can interview bin Laden, who actually attacked the USA, but Carlson is the traitor here. At what point did Russia attack the USA outside of the movie Red Dawn? Good point there. Thank you for the super chat. None of your business. Ballot harvesting will make up the difference between Trump and Biden. And thank you for the super chat, Snork. But if Brandon pulls some trouser chocolate from his pants on camera, it will drop to 5%, 1% if he eats it. Very funny. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Daniel. I'm sharing a link below to a parody of the song Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, where Biden and Netanyahu give their sick response to the ICJ ruling. It was written by Katie Halper and Daniel Mate, two people of Jewish heritage who are very critical of Israel's treatments of the Palestinians. Daniel Mate's voices Netanyahu, Michael McCrae voices Biden, and yes, that is Aaron Mate's brother. Yeah, I think we follow each other. Thank you for that. I have to check that out. That should be pretty funny. I'm ready for the next part of Type V and C whenever you are, Eric. Yeah, that should be pretty interesting. I've interviewed Katie on here before, so she's very knowledgeable about this. Now we're moving on to something a little bit different. So I have not watched award shows in a long time. When I was growing up, I was really into the MTV Movie Awards and Music Awards and the Grammys. I loved watching all that stuff. And as I got older, I started to realize that it was the same people performing every year. It was the same people winning awards. So I actually did not watch the Grammys. Surprise, surprise. But I did hear about it. And there's some news we have to discuss. It appears that rapper Killer Mike actually won 3 Grammys at the recent Grammy Awards. That's a big deal. I consider Killer Mike to be a great rapper. I also feel like he's been heavily underrated as a rapper, to be honest with you. But he's also an organizer within the community. He's very vocal. He supported Bernie Sanders. He was the one that made the t-shirts that said Black Guys for Bernie when Bernie was running and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of positives about Killer Mike. So you're probably wondering what happened. Well, apparently after Killer Mike won those 3 Grammys, apparently Killer Mike was arrested at the Grammys. Let's go ahead and get into this story. It is something else, ladies and gentlemen.
So we do not usually cover showbiz on this program, unless, of course, somebody gets arrested. And wouldn't you know it, somebody did last night at the Grammys. I don't know if you were watching, but when I heard that rap legend Killer Mike was hauled off to the station in cuffs, I had all these visions of like Will Smith, right? A moment like, where instead the cops actually did something about it for a change. Let me break down the stuff that's going on right now on your screen. Killer Mike's real name is Michael Render, and he was spotted right there being escorted out of last night's Grammys in handcuffs.
Again, this was right after he won the 3 awards. So it was kind of like, congratulations. Now we're taking you to jail.
And while the details of what actually happened are still a little sketchy, there are a couple things we do know. LAPD says that Mike was booked for a, quote, misdemeanor battery after a, quote, physical altercation at the actual venue. So there's one report that says a security guard may have been the other party involved. And in a text, Killer Mike reportedly blamed, quote, overzealous security. He was released a couple of hours later. All of this happening on the night that he had just won 3 Grammys, basically sweeping the rap category. So it was like a really good night till it wasn't a really good night. And of course, we flashed back to the Oscars in 2022 when Will Smith did that, hauled off and slapped Chris Rock live on the stage in front of millions of people. But Will Smith was not cuffed. He was not arrested. He wasn't charged.
Let me chime in here for a second, because this is an example I think that is a good example to compare it to, right? Will Smith actually walked up onto the stage and smacked the crap out of Chris Rock. Just a kapow, you know? Wasn't arrested. I don't even remember them asking him to leave the venue. But with Killer Mike, and you'll hear more about this altercation in just a second, with Killer Mike, he was arrested and taken to jail. Now, there's a couple of differences. The accusations in reference to Killer Mike, you know, she said that it was security. Apparently, it was a female security guard. There's that. We'll get into what actually happened. And but the other thing is that, what is the difference between the two? What's the difference between Killer Mike and Will Smith? You see, Will Smith, he fits into this category of he's accepted by a lot of people, right? So let's just keep it real. There is a difference between the two. Will Smith was also a rapper. People are saying it's a rapper versus not a rapper thing. Will Smith was a rapper. In fact, the first rap Grammy was awarded to DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Will Smith, that was the very first one. Very first one. The Grammys didn't even acknowledge rap as a category until 1989. Will is accepted by white America. He's accepted more so by the establishment. Could you imagine them actually putting handcuffs on Will Smith and taking him away? Oh, people would lose their minds. But with someone like Killer Mike, they feel they don't have to worry about that because he's not as accepted. Killer Mike is also an activist. He speaks out a lot. There are some times I wish he would have spoke out more, like in reference to Cop City. I wish he would have been vocal earlier on. But he's known for speaking out against things. Let's continue. These are just some of the things to think about.
Instead, Will Smith got to go back to his seat and then stay there until called up to the stage to pick up his Best Actor statue. So did the LA police, or maybe the awards producers, did they learn from their mistakes? Or are the officers just more inclined to arrest somebody who has killer in their name? I don't know the answer, but I will say this. It is a good thing that Killer Mike was released today because he needed to be out for his son's much needed operation. Sources say that Killer Mike's 21-year-old son received a kidney transplant today after waiting on a list for 3 years. So it goes without saying that we really do hope everything goes well for Killer Mike's son and for the family as they go through this really difficult time. And I'm really curious about the details of whatever it was went on backstage. And I'm really curious if this is now a new trend. Don't go hitting people at an award show because something's going to happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, let's get into a little bit more detail because there's something else that happened too. And I'm going to point to this as I wonder if this is one of the reasons why they're coming after Killer Mike. So here are more details about what happened that night. Killer Mike's Grammy arrest, rapper cites confusion as new details emerge. So let's get into this. The reason Killer Mike was taken away in handcuffs after winning 3 Grammy Awards Sunday is coming into focus. A senior law enforcement source says a female security guard working the star-studded event claims she was injured by the rapper during a confrontation inside the Crypto.com arena in LA. Killer Mike denies the allegation in a new statement to Rolling Stone. According to the source, it was shortly after the Atlanta musician, whose real name is Michael Render, swept the rap category with trophies for Best Rap Album, Best Rap Song, and Best Rap Performance that he allegedly encountered the guard near her assigned entrance. The guard told police she asked for Render's tickets and directed him to a security checkpoint. At this point, she claims Render tried to make his way around her, and when she ran around and got in front of him again, he allegedly pushed her to the ground. This piece here. The female guard allegedly suffered an injury to her hand and her fingers. The well-placed LAPD source said the woman called for help and her fellow security officers surrendered Render outside the arena and called the police. The guard received medical treatment, signed a citizen's arrest for misdemeanor battery, and had photos taken of her alleged injuries. Render was then arrested and transported for booking, processing, and release on his own recognizance. Now, I guess what I want to ask is, do you guys really think, or could you imagine Killer Mike actually pushing a female security guard to the ground? Or could it have been that he was trying to scoot past her and she fell? I'm just trying to envision him walking up to a security guard, a female security guard, and pushing her to the ground like that, and then just walking away. So that's her version of the events. Now let's continue on. In his statement to Rolling Stone, Render denies the allegation. As you can imagine, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of going, and there was some confusion around which door my team and I should enter. We experienced an overzealous security guard, but my team and I have the utmost confidence that I will ultimately be cleared of all wrongdoing. It goes on to say here, the situation has been overblown, but we are confident that the facts of the case, when laid bare, will show that Mike did not commit the alleged offense and he will be exonerated. Now, that's a source from the artist's camp. So it goes on to say the law enforcement source who spoke to Rolling Stone was aware of critics who have questioned why Render was arrested while Will Smith was allowed to remain at the 2022 Oscars after he struck Chris Rock in the face. Let me highlight this part here. There's a big difference. Chris Rock did not want to make a report, didn't want to make an arrest. It was a fellow artist, and I guess they sorted it out themselves. Had Chris Rock said, I want to make a citizen's arrest, it would have been honored. The source said in this case, it was a private citizen and she had everything she needed to exercise her rights to make a citizen's arrest. And we are bound by law to make that arrest. So it appears that the female security guard actually did ask to arrest him. So this is important. Before issuing his statement, Render appeared on an Atlanta radio show Monday morning and jovially deflected questions about the incident, describing his arrest as a minor detour on an otherwise celebratory night. We hit a speed bump, and then we head back to the party. He told the Bigger Tigger morning show. He said he was only then leaving his final party after he won Best Rap Album for Michael and Best Rap Song and Best Rap Performance for Scientists and Engineers. I want to thank everyone who dares to believe that art can change the world. It is our responsibility to keep using our imagination to shape and form the world. In his written remarks to Rolling Stone, Render says he and his team worked hard for the recognition. We are incredibly proud and basking in this moment. He added that more good news arrived Monday. I'm also grateful that one of my prayers has been answered. The day after my Grammy win, I learned that my son, who has been on the list for a kidney for years, finally has a match. Obviously, we are elated. So as you can tell there, different version of what happened that night, different version of events between the security officer and Killer Mike. Now, I'm imagining there probably were witnesses at some point if you're entering and they're asking for a ticket. So shouldn't there have been a witness here or there to at least collaborate at least one of their stories? I'm pretty sure there are security cameras in this venue as well, right? Couldn't they have just gone back to the security footage to see what really happened? That probably will happen at some point. And then some are starting to wonder this. There was an interview recently that Killer Mike had with Bill Maher, where Bill Maher refused to endorse Joe Biden. And this is another thing that some people are pointing to. Is this why they're coming after Killer Mike? Listen to this.
What are your feelings on the election coming up? I mean, Biden and Trump, are you as depressed about that as most people as a choice?
My feeling is pick your policy, not your person. Find out. This is.
I love this FM. FM said it was the Dems. That's what some people are wondering. Let me continue. Sorry.
It's not the Dallas Cowboys versus your favorite team. This is the policies that will affect our generations for the next 20, 30, 40 years to come. So close your eyes, listen to the policies that are being pushed, and pay attention even to the people who don't have a chance of winning, because they're going to say policies you may want to push. And I would say do that, but make it policy based.
So that part right there is not what they would want to hear. It's definitely not what Bill Maher would want to hear. He's an ass anyway, but that's definitely not what Bill Maher would want to hear. That's not what the DNC would want to hear. Obviously, they would want you to say, and a lot of the celebrities do. There's a lot of liberals, like in Hollywood, they would just come on there and they would say, oh, of course, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump, right? But remember, and I don't know if Bill Maher remembers, but remember, Killer Mike actually supported Bernie Sanders. So just keep that in mind. So I think that's important what he said, like focus on the policies and not the person. I think that's important. I wish more people did that and they didn't actually fall in love with a politician, which I think some people do, and they're not paying attention to the policies. That was not the answer that Bill wanted to hear.
You're for...
That means I'm for black people and happy Black History Month.
But you're not saying one candidate over the other?
Hey man, my nigga, you ain't gonna get me in no trouble tonight.
So you see, he said he was not saying one candidate over the other.
No, that's your job with me, to get me in trouble.
My grandfather gave me some stellar advice sometimes. He said, son, sometimes you just got to know to stay out of white folks' business. And this time, I'm going to keep my mouth closed. I still like the policy that the old man had that I was supporting. I would encourage people to find who's supporting that policy and see what happens.
But you can't get yourself to say vote for Biden over Trump?
You see how Bill Maher is pushing this here? He's trying to push him into having to choose one or the other. You know, not everything is black and white. And some people like to think outside the box. Bill does not. Bill does not. Okay. So he's trying to push him.
You want me to list it now? So now
I'm just saying that.
Can he get himself to apologize for the crime bill? Can he get himself to get his head out of his ass and say, black people, you are black regardless. I need you to tell me what I need to do. Can he pick a coalition of former people who are affected by drug laws, street gangs, recidivism and crime and say, I need you as a board to advise me how to fix federal prisons? If he can do that, absolutely I can. So my challenge is out there.
All right.
This is what happens when you push people. He's telling them all the things that Joe Biden needs to do. And obviously we know Joe Biden is not going to do those things. Let's just be clear. But let's think about something, folks. There's something I actually just thought about. You know, there have been a number of clips of Bill Maher. He's also a Zionist, being very critical against the people that are you know, pro-Palestine. Made jokes about the genocide happening in Gaza and in a disgusting way. Right? If I was Killer Mike, I wouldn't have even gone on to Bill Maher's show. I definitely wouldn't have smiled at Bill Maher. Right? So we have Bill Maher out there calling people anti-Semitic because they support the Palestinian fight. But I just want to remind everybody, where was that same push against Bill Maher when he was using the N-word on his show? You see all the people like Bill Maher and Bill Ackman and all the Zionists that are calling for the cancellation of all of these, the protesters and people who are supporting the Palestinians' right to self-determination. All those people were quiet when Bill Maher was using the M-word on his show. Always remember that. So I guess we'll find out more in reference to the arrest with Killer Mike. It is kind of a bummer, though, like to win 3 Grammys. It's probably the biggest night of your musical career, not to mention what I've seen over the years in reference to, you know, a lot of these awards. I told you this is why I stopped watching them. It's the same people. Like, I already know Taylor Swift going to be up there. Beyonce going to be there somewhere. A couple years ago, Katy Perry would make an appearance. It was always the same people. But when you see someone like Killer Mike walk up on that stage and win 3 Grammys, that lets you know that it's, number one, it's never too late, because Killer Mike isn't like in his 20s or 30s. He's an older guy, right? And the rap game tends to be a little bit more favorable towards the younger cats. But that goes to show you that regardless, you can still make these things happen. And then it was kind of like, to have the arrest happen after that, it was kind of like a crushing blow. It's like, damn. You know, it's like you just won the lottery, but then now you're going to jail. You know, I don't know, just something like that. So we'll have to hear more information about how this unfolds. But I have a feeling, I don't know, I have a feeling that this is going to work out in Killer Mike's favor. I really just don't. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that venue has security cameras, so they can always just go back to the video footage to see what actually happened between him and the female security officer. But other than that, we'll just have to wait and see. Very interesting. And there are some areas where I feel like Killer Mike could have been stronger. In reference to Cop City, I felt like he was very quiet until he was pushed, right? Whereas a voice like his actually could have made the Stop Cop City movement even more powerful. Just if Killer Mike would have gotten up there, right? You have someone that, and it's not just him, the Tyler Perrys, all these people that live in Atlanta that are celebrities that were quiet about this issue. I felt like that would have made the movement even bigger, in my opinion. So it is what it is. Congratulations, Killer Mike. Hopefully you figure this out. Hopefully you figure this out. Let me go to some of the comments. There's a lot of, oh my God. Thank you, P. Smith, for the super chat. B. Walter interview with Gaddafi, Sean Penn, El Chapo. Barbara Walters, that's who you're talking about. We're going to show her in a minute. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. As far as I know, food is no longer included in the consumer price index, so it doesn't show up when the government talks about inflation. Thank you, 100 Black Roke. Bernie's set the standard for Zionist lies and propaganda. I have been educating myself. Education is out there. Shout out to Black Roke for being a member for 6 months. Thank you for the super chat, New York. That's how I want to leave the Grammys, in handcuffs. Thank you for the super sticker, Trash Panda. Those are raccoons. For people who don't know, trash pandas, the raccoons, because they get in the trash, eat all the food. Thank you for the super chat, Tony D. You are smart, insightful, beautiful lady. Thank you. That's really sweet. Bryce says summertime did hit though. You're right, Bryce. Okay, so I will say DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Summertime, I do like that song. Yes, you're right. Thank you for the super chat, Lorez. About the last story, Obama also broke tradition by campaigning for Hillary as the incumbent, and she still lost. Very embarrassing indeed, Sabby. LOL. Thank you for the super chat, RB Ham. The Will Smith slap was obviously staged. That's not what they've come forward and said. I mean, they've talked about this more recently too. But I thought it was staged too at first when I saw it. But apparently there was some beef brewing between Chris and Will for quite some time, actually. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Carter only served 1 term, but his national security advisor, oh yeah, Brzezinski, that's Mika's dad. That's Mika from Morning Joe, guys. Managed to start war between Afghanistan and the USSR by funding Islamic fundamentalist rebels in Afghanistan. Interesting. Thank you, NY Varsity. Pictures taken. Smells like lawsuit. # money grab. I'm pretty sure someone would have seen something, you know? Thank you for the super chat, Tony D. I learned Harry S. Truman planned Palestine ethnic cleansing for Israel. Just facts. It wouldn't surprise me. Would not surprise me. Let's go to the next one. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Killer Mike's been a political activist for a while around Atlanta. As far as I know, he's a good and righteous man. Thank you for that. And thank you, Eric. I'm voting for Trump for his policy and its benefits. A lot of Americans. I'm a business owner and Trump's tax cuts help my business grow. Interesting. Interesting. Well, Eric, I don't know what to tell you, but it is what it is. Let's get to this news here about Tucker Carlson. So for those who are not aware, Tucker Carlson has been making waves recently because he was spotted in Russia. And of course, you know, that is considered to be a no-no by some during a time when we have the Ukraine war and the United States is in favor of Ukraine and not Russia. So people were speculating, is Tucker Carlson there to interview Putin? And would that be a problem or not? We'll go to Simon Ataba here. He actually captured this video for Sputnik. It says Tucker Carlson leaves the Kremlin after interviewing President Vladimir Putin. At this point, it was just alleged. We didn't know, for sure. But you can see they're saying that that was actually Tucker Carlson in that vehicle is what they believed, and that he was leaving the Kremlin. So let's go ahead and check. We're walking through a sequence of events here. Here's another one from Hotspot that says Tucker Carlson leaves Russia with his recording equipment. It looks like we can expect an interview soon. I've got to tell you, people were on it, okay? People were on this. So there's the equipment there. And there's the same vehicle, right? So neither one of those guys was Tucker Carlson, just FYI. There's the vehicle exiting there. So I want to remind you of something, because before I show you what Tucker has said recently, some people are saying that, Tucker Carlson is trying to do this now because he's not a part of Fox News. Not necessarily. Actually, Tucker Carlson wanted to interview Vladimir Putin when he worked for Fox News. And if you may have forgotten, I just want to go ahead and show you the clip that reminds you about that. Check this out.
The Biden administration's largest intelligence gathering agency, the NSA, had been reading my private emails. Even saying that out loud is weird. It's one of those segments we never thought we would do ever. But the country has changed that much that fast. And honestly, the whole thing was kind of shocking. The government was spying on us? Come on. It seemed crazy. But it's true. And no one in Washington appeared to be shocked in the slightest. In fact, the usual shills right after our segment had a ready explanation for it. Either it never happened at all, they said, just a cable news show lying for ratings, or there must have been a good reason it happened. And they began furiously making excuses for why the NSA did it. A powerful, heavily politicized spy agency surveilling journalists who've been critical of the regime? No problem. It's perfectly normal. Just don't call it spying. But it's not normal at all. It is third world. And as we told you repeatedly, it did happen. Now that has been confirmed. Yesterday, we learned that sources in the so-called intelligence community told at least one reporter in Washington what was in those emails, my emails. There was nothing scandalous in there, thank God. We're happy to report that. Late this spring, I contacted a couple of people I thought could help get us an interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
See, just a reminder for everyone, because I saw a number of people on social media and they were saying, oh, well, now he gets to do the interviews, or he's going to try to interview someone that he may have wanted to, but didn't try to before because he was a part of corporate media. But just a reminder, that was not the case. When he was working with Fox News, he was actually trying to get an interview with Vladimir Putin back then. We found that out because he talked about the release of his emails.
I told nobody I was doing this other than my executive producer, Justin Wells. I wasn't embarrassed about trying to interview Putin. He's obviously newsworthy. I'm an American citizen. I can interview anyone I want, and I plan to. But still, in this case, I decided to keep it quiet. I figured that any kind of publicity would rattle the Russians and make the interview less likely to happen.
Okay, so let's ask this question, what Tucker Carlson just was asking there, or saying there. He said he can interview anyone that he wants. And I think as a journalist, you should be able to interview anyone that you want. However, people are not liking this at all. And I'm talking about the mainstream media pundits. You know, they had some things to say. We'll start with Jen Psaki. They really don't want this to happen. Jen Psaki believes that Tucker Carlson is trying to stay relevant, she says. He is trying to stay relevant. Let's hear this bit here from Jen Psaki, this little soundbite here.
Of course, Carlson is now just another far-right conspiracy peddler with a show on the internet. He's no longer on Fox, as we all know. And he's apparently been spending the last few days in Moscow for some reason. Who knows? We don't know why. He has to stay relevant somehow. So I guess we'll learn in the coming days. Maybe.
People can say that about Jen Psaki, right? Because she was Biden's press secretary. People could say the same thing about her. Well, apparently Jen Psaki is going to actually be a commentator for MSNBC now that she has resigned from her press secretary gig. Maybe she's trying to stay relevant somehow. People could have said the same thing about Simone Sanders, actually multiple times. She went from Bernie to Biden and then didn't get the press secretary job and then went to MSNBC. But anyway, the thing is you can see the criticism is already happening. And I want to ask you a question. What happened to the days when a journalist was actually supposed to get both sides of the story? I firmly believe, regardless if there is a war, regardless which side the West is on, shouldn't we hear both sides of the story? For example, if Zelensky can have interviews on CNN and MSNBC, isn't it only fair and appropriate for Vladimir Putin to be interviewed on those outlets as well? Or are we only allowed to listen to the perspective of the West? And these are questions we have to ask ourselves. We got to ask these questions because we have CNN out here that is very upset that Tucker Carlson is in Russia and there's a possibility for him to interview Vladimir Putin. As if, again, We're not supposed to hear both sides of the story. This is because they want to maintain control of the narrative. And I think they are very worried about what Vladimir Putin could say to Tucker Carlson. This could be the first time that we actually get to hear from Putin himself in a conversation with a Western journalist, his perspective about what has happened in reference to Ukraine. And that scares the establishment. That scares the military industrial complex. And I'm willing to bet that scares NATO, because NATO started this war to begin with. Listen to CNN's response to this.
It's the man you see here with the MAGA leader, Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, possibly there in Moscow to interview Putin, definitely there as a Putin supporting celebrity. Just listen to how Russian state media is breathlessly celebrating his visit.
Independent journalist Tucker Carlson has flown to Russia from the U.S. via Turkey to Vnukovo Airport. He saw Spartacus Ballet at the Bolshoi Theater, had lunch in a nice restaurant, went for a ride around town, rode the subway. He charged his smartphone via a USB port and connected to a fast and free Wi-Fi internet.
He charged his phone, although they're knowing the details about the fact that it was during USB port may give him reason to think twice about all of this. But look at them talking about him like a celebrity. Everything he does on camera, breathlessly repeated. No,
isn't she doing the same thing, though? This is interesting. Like, she's criticizing the fact that they're giving him that type of attention, but she's also giving him that same attention by covering this story.
It is unclear if an interview between Putin and Carlson will take place, but if it does, it gives Putin a chance to sit down with a big supporter.
It might be worth asking yourself, since it is getting pretty serious, what is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Does he eat dogs? These are fair questions, and the answer to all of them is no. Vladimir Putin didn't do any of that.
I'll actually always remember watching that clip. I was standing in Ukraine 48 hours before the war began there. Well, Carlson then stood by Putin consistently all the way through. And that.
Let's go back just a little bit about the Ukraine part, because I want to say something here. She sounds a little jealous.
Oh. Vladimir Putin didn't do any of that.
I'll actually always remember watching that clip. I was standing in Ukraine 48 hours before the war began there.
Pause. So that's great, Aaron, that you went to Ukraine to get their perspective and to hear their voice. Did you go to Russia? Of all these interviews that we've seen with Zelensky, none of these people have tried to interview Vladimir Putin. Why are you afraid to give us both sides of the story? I thought that's what journalism was supposed to be about. And if that's the case, what are you trying to hide from us? And Aaron comes off a little bit jealous here, almost, it seems like, right? Like, well, while you were there, I was in Ukraine doing da-da-da. It's really weird. It's really weird. You know, they have failed with the narrative about the Ukraine war because they wanted everyone to get on board and say, we have to push back against Russia. And some of us were over here sitting like, push back against what? They had the Minsk Accords. They actually wanted to have negotiation in the beginning, but then it was later revealed that the United States and the United Kingdom pushed back against that negotiation, which means that the United States and the United Kingdom just wanted them to go to war. So the U.S. government is involved in this. And again, it's a win for who? It's again for the weapon contractors and the military industrial complex. It's not a win for the American people. It's not a win for Ukrainian people. A lot of Ukrainians have died. So let's think about that for a second.
Well, Carlson then stood by Putin consistently all the way through. And that is why he can go to Moscow now without any fear of being summarily imprisoned. He's a hero. This was Putin's mouthpiece in the United States, somebody who had turned a blind eye to the atrocities committed by Putin because they were happening far away. Once vibrant towns turned to ruins, mass graves with dozens of bodies in the Kyiv suburbs.
Oh, that sounds familiar. That sounds very familiar because we have the mass graves and the rubble in Gaza. You didn't want to talk about that, Aaron. You were talking about the 1,200 people that were killed at the festival in Israel. Genocide in Gaza, had it not been for the protests, you wouldn't be covering that side of it at all. Us, the activists, we had to push you to talk about those things. But when those things happened to Ukraine, you could talk about that because Israel's not involved.
Theater full of innocent women and children sheltering, bombed, despite the giant world's children written on the roof. More than 200,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed or injured. And tonight, Putin is trying to seize on the fact that Zelensky's military appears to be in turmoil, capitalizing on a moment of intense American political dysfunction and intensifying strikes.
I don't know how much they're paying this woman, but it must be a lot. Okay, it must be a lot. I think Aaron is really getting paid. So as you can see, mainstream media is heavily against Tucker Carlson having this interview with Vladimir Putin. But it's really interesting because they didn't seem to feel this way when Barbara Walters interviewed Vladimir Putin. Granted, there wasn't the war with Ukraine during that point in time, but it was still Russia. And to the United States, that's considered a boogeyman country. It always has been as long as I've been alive. And if it's not coming from mainstream media, it's coming from Hollywood through movies and TV shows where they demonize Russia and have us think that these are big red scare people and they're going to try to kill us all. I've seen this my whole life, even when I was a little kid, right? Rocky IV. But Barbara Walters interviewed Vladimir Putin. And I don't remember mainstream media pushing back on her when she sat down and had this interview with Vladimir Putin. In fact, Barbara Walters was applauded for taking brave interviews and taking on guests like this. So what has happened? What is this really about? And I'll show you here. Here's Barbara Walters and Putin.
I would say that the United States is losing not in the military, but in the information. It seems to me that on the information field, terrorists are acting more aggressively and more offensively, and they are presenting opposition in terms of emotions. As to the military dimension, in our assessment, things happen the way they should. I would say that the United States is...
So you see this? So here's Vladimir Putin, and there's Barbara Walters. Joy Duncan says, I saw someone bring up that Barbara Walters often interviewed world leaders and controversial leaders, people, and she was called brave. Exactly. This is what I'm saying. So what has happened, folks? What has happened? Is there jealousy involved? There could be some of that. Well, Tucker Carlson finally did break the ice and decide to tell people what he is really doing in Moscow. I saw this earlier today. He is having that interview with Vladimir Putin, and he's also going to explain to you why he is deciding to do it. Listen to this.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We'll be doing that soon. There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously. So we thought about it carefully over many months. Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, here in Russia or 600 miles away in Ukraine. But they should know. They're paying for much of it in ways they might not fully yet perceive. The war in Ukraine is a human disaster. It's left hundreds of thousands of people dead, an entire generation of young Ukrainians, and it's depopulated the largest country in Europe. But the long-term effects are even more profound. This war has utterly reshaped the global military and trade alliances, and the sanctions that followed have as well. And in total, they have upended the world economy. The post-World War II economic order, the system that guaranteed prosperity in the West for more than 80 years, is coming apart very fast, and along with it, the dominance of the U.S. dollar.
This piece right here is incredibly important, the dominance of the U.S. dollar. We've talked about this before with BRICS. We've talked about how other countries like South Africa and China and Russia have come together as a part of BRICS. They do not want to depend on the US dollar anymore. This is important. This can affect us. So when people say that foreign policy doesn't affect us over here, yes, it does. So this is important that people need to understand what could happen here with countries that are choosing to have a multipolar world. We're not a part of that. And we're not a part of that, not because we don't choose to be. We're not a part of that because the US decided a long time ago that they were going to be a dominant power. They don't really want to have any type of horizontal organization. They don't want a multipolar world. So what people have to understand with Tucker Carlson having this interview with Vladimir Putin, it's not just I'm going over there because I want the popularity and all that kind of stuff. It's more so related to what he was talking about here in reference to the economy as well, which will affect us. We may be the biggest power, the biggest, baddest or whatever around the world now, but things are changing and other countries are choosing to align with each other and push back against the United States, even if that means creating their own currency. So people have to understand that this actually does matter. This is important. And I think, if anything, I think one of the worst things that we can do as a country is to continue to paint Russia as the big, bad boogeyman, which I don't believe, by the way. And I think there's been a lot of lies that have been said about Russia. And to find a way to have some type of peace. Let's continue here.
These are not small changes. They are history-altering developments. They will define the lives of our grandchildren. Most of the world understands this perfectly well. They can see it. Ask anyone in Asia or the Middle East what the future looks like. And yet the populations of the English-speaking countries seem mostly unaware. They think that nothing has really changed. And they think that because no one has told them the truth. Their media outlets are corrupt. They lie to their readers and viewers. And they do that mostly by omission. For example, since the day the war in Ukraine began, American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they have done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts.
That's the part I wanted you to hear right there, because I showed you the mainstream media pundits because they're trying to make it seem like Tucker Carlson just wants to show Putin's side. I wanted you to hear that part there where he's telling you they put in a request for Zelensky as well. Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. They put in a request to interview Zelensky as well. So that's what real journalism looks like. Going out there in the field and trying to get both sides. CNN isn't doing that. Fox News isn't doing that. MSNBC isn't doing that. Mainstream media is not doing that, especially in reference to war.
But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict.
That's exactly what the point that I was getting at. And it's the same thing. It's like, even in reference to Israel and Gaza, how many times have they interviewed Netanyahu? How many times have they interviewed his advisor? His advisor has done numerous interviews, right? How many of those commentators from mainstream media have actually interviewed people from Gaza? You see what I mean? They don't want you to hear both sides. They only want you to hear the side that fits their narrative. So I think interviewing both sides, which seems like Tucker's trying to do, I think that's actually getting back to old school journalism, like the Walter Cronkite journalism, and not just talking to the side that the West wants you to side with.
Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House. But they're trying anyway. Almost 3 years ago, the Biden administration illegally spied on our text messages and then leaked the contents to their servants in the news media. They did this in order to stop a Putin interview that we were planning. Last month, we're pretty certain they did exactly the same thing once again. But this time, we came to Moscow anyway.
Yep.
We are not here because we love Vladimir Putin. We are here because we love the United States. And we want it to remain prosperous and free.
And to avoid a nuclear war, let's keep it real, because Putin has the nukes. Putin has the nukes. Is not someone you want to piss off.
We paid for this trip ourselves. We took no money from any government or group. Nor are we charging people to see the interview. It is not behind a paywall. Anyone can watch the entire thing, shot live to tape and unedited, on our website, tuckercarlson.com.
Okay, so you'll be able to see the interview on his website for free. You don't have to pay for it. No paywall. You guys know I don't do paywalls on this show, but no paywall. But the other thing I want to mention too, and I want to give a warning to all of my YouTube peeps out there in the atmosphere. I would hold off showing that interview on YouTube because I have a feeling that YouTube is going to pull that. I think if anyone wants to cover that interview, maybe you should cover it on Rumble and Rockfin. But I think it would be dangerous to cover that interview with Tucker and Putin on YouTube because they're probably most likely going to pull it and they'll probably try to shut you down. Just keeping it real.
Elon Musk, to his great credit, has promised not to suppress or block this interview once we post it on his platform, X, and we're grateful for that. Western governments, by contrast, will certainly do their best to censor this video on other less principled platforms because that's what they do. They are afraid of information they can't control. But you have no reason to be afraid of it. We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. You should know as much as you can. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself. Thanks.
So this is important. We never actually heard from Vladimir Putin why he decided to invade Ukraine. And I think it would be doing damage to the American people to not actually hear his side of the story. And I would say that with any conflict, I think you should hear from both sides, not just the side that the West supports. This is often why I think in a lot of foreign conflicts, American people become heavily propagandized, because I go back to the war in Iraq. I remember the lie that was told to us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. That was a lie. Didn't have weapons of mass destruction, but they told that lie so that we could go to war with Iraq. And just imagine if journalists in the United States actually would have been permitted to interview the other side so that you heard both sides of the story, right? Something like that, something similar to that did happen during the war in Vietnam. But I told you, after that war, they decided we are not going to show civilian casualties on TV in reference to war, because there was a lot of unrest back home in the States when people saw those videos, when they saw the kids being killed, when they saw the women being killed. You know, a lot of those soldiers that came back from Vietnam, the ones who did make it back, were called baby killers when they came back into the United States. So I think that's very important for people to understand. You should hear from both sides. And we should all be questioning why our media has been hiding that from us. They've been doing us a disservice, right? Again, because they only want us to hear one narrative. Now, here's the problem that Tucker Carlson may run into. People are already demanding that Tucker Carlson not be permitted back in the United States. Now, we know this happened with Tara Reid. I interviewed Tara Reid about her situation. She went to Russia to publish her book in multiple languages. Then she was told not to come back to the United States or she may be detained. You know, Tara Reid still has her allegations against President Biden. Now we have people like Bill Kristol coming after Tucker Carlson for the same, says perhaps we need a total and complete shutdown of Tucker Carlson re-entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what is going on. So as a journalist, it is your job to get the story. But now it is getting to the point where our government doesn't want you to travel to certain countries to get their side of the story, particularly Russia. There have been a number of independent media journalists that have actually traveled to Russia to do a couple of interviews only to be detained when they return home. So for me, I wonder, I mean, you know, Tucker Carlson, he's popular. He's well off financially. Maybe they won't come after him. Maybe they won't detain him, but you never know. You never know. But they are heavily coming after him for going to Russia to do that interview. And I'm going to tell you guys, they are very concerned about what that interview may reveal. Now, keep in mind, folks, a lot of people are not paying attention to independent media. If people have been paying attention to independent media, if everybody was watching more of that instead of CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, then people would have understood that the negotiation option was on the table from the very beginning, that both countries wanted to try some type of negotiation, but it was actually Joe Biden who said no, and the Prime Minister of the UK that said no, which means the US and the UK actually wanted this war to happen, just like the US wanted the war in Iraq to happen, and they lied to make sure that it would. Imagine if we could have heard the other side of the story then, and how many lives would have been saved. So these are things that you need to keep in mind. So for me, I kind of look at this as though I want to hear the other side of the story. Do you guys want to hear the other side of the story? But people are calling Tucker Carlson a traitor. They're saying he's a traitor for interviewing Vladimir Putin. What happened to just doing journalism? Now, I'll show you a funny piece here. Someone sent me this. So did Vlad not say hello to Netanyahu even after sitting down? Now, apparently this is from a couple of years ago. This was in 2020. The world leaders at the Fifth World Holocaust Forum in Jerusalem in January 2020. Watch this. You'll notice even here, apparently he was not feeling Bibi. Watch this. That's Macron. There's King Charles. He's sitting right next to him and doesn't acknowledge him. He leaned over to shake King Charles' hand. He's sitting right next to Netanyahu and doesn't even acknowledge that he is there. That was hilarious. It is really interesting. I thought you'd get a kick out of that. But what did you guys think? How did you feel? Let's see the poll result, Eric. Do you think that Tucker Carlson is being a traitor by interviewing Vladimir Putin? Interesting. 1,952 votes. Is Tucker a traitor for interviewing Putin? 4% of you said yes. 91% of you said no. And 5% of you said, I'm not sure. That is interesting. Interesting. Well, one thing is for sure, folks, ladies and gents, I think that this is going to break the internet because I think a lot of people are going to want to see that show. So get ready for that. And then also, like I told you guys, get ready for it. YouTube, YouTube. And even though Elon Musk said it will be secure on X, I still think all of these platforms are going to be pressured to remove that interview with Vladimir Putin, whether it's X, whether it's YouTube. Rumble might let it slide. Rockfin's usually kind of quiet on that end, but I think they're all going to be pressured to remove it. So my thing is, as soon as that interview is posted on his website, you might want to go ahead and check it out because I don't know how much longer it's going to be allowed to last there. Make no mistake, Elon Musk said he can show it on X, But Elon Musk has also been pressured from outside sources to limit certain information on X as well. X is not a free speech platform, despite what some people may think. So I will say this again to the other commentators. I do not recommend you to show that interview on your show on YouTube, because I have a feeling they are going to remove it and you're probably going to get hit. But that being said, I think that as a journalist, you can interview whoever you want. People don't have to watch it. If you have a problem, Aaron from CNN, if you have a problem with Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin, don't watch it. Jen Psaki, if you have a problem with Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin, don't watch it. There, fixed it. Look how easy that was. But what we should not be doing is smearing people, censoring people, and trying to turn people against someone for interviewing someone where you guys dropped the ball. You should have been doing those interviews all this time. Maybe that's why the ratings are so low. All right. We are going to do call in tonight, guys. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thumbs up for the ups. Thank you so much for that. If you are new, don't forget to sub and share. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a quick break. Eric, I think there's a couple more super chats, and then I'm going to come back and we'll head to call in.
All right. Here we are on our Tuesday. So this is the part of the show where we give Sabrina a little break and I jump in for a little while and see what's been happening in the chats. And then we'll be hopping over to call in. Although actually first, all right, here we're going to do a little something different here. I'm going to show you the real star of the show. Are you ready for this? Doom. It's Kiva. You're the star. So this is our real star, Kiva. What, you sleepy? All right, that's how you really get the views on here. All right, all the Kiva fans. All right, we'll catch you later. Here's our Kiva cat. Don't mind while I jump the camera around here. All right, you've seen the real star. Now let's see what we got for some super chats. Thanks for this one. This account pending review. I think security might have been upset at Mike because he brought his crew on stage for his final acceptance speech. Venues are bitchy about that. Yeah, maybe. I mean, Corey and I were wondering if where was Killer Mike's people and his security. I mean, you would think someone who's a big shot like that and would have like security people kind of around him and in front of him to just kind of stop stuff like that from happening. But who knows? Yeah, it's kind of a weird, curious situation, the whole thing. Thanks to the super chat in DC. Watch NBC's interview with Putin from 2021. Priceless. Thanks for that. And the Oracle Delphi says, in the age of independent media, narrative control is a bigger concern. It's a more unwieldy proposition. Yeah, and I certainly agree that kind of everything comes, narrative control is huge. Excuse me. My turn for a tickle in the throat. In that the powers that be, this very small number of people at the top who have the money and the power, they understand that there's a lot more of us than there are of them, and if they lose the propaganda war, they're going to be in big trouble. And so yeah, I mean they put all their efforts and their money and everything into the propaganda, into the narrative. Caitlin Johnstone talks about this a lot, propaganda and narrative. And speaking of Caitlin Johnstone, she recently released an episode of their podcast with Caitlin Johnstone and her husband Tim Foley that I'm looking forward to giving a good listen to. It's audio only, but that should be a pretty cool conversation. Thanks for the super chat. NY Varsity Sports. I'm sorry, but unless the film Red Dawn was a documentary, when did Russia ever attack us? CNN is mad because it was not CNN who got the gig. Yep, fair enough. And thanks for this generous super chat, Shalon Flores. Schumer said on CNN, if the money for Ukraine doesn't get passed, we're going to boots on the ground. We're putting up our money and our blood. We'd better have the whole story. They also never talk about that peace treaty that Zelensky refused. Yeah, and the other thing it makes me think of is just that all, wars are about money and profit. Every bomb that's dropped is a profit for the war profiteers. And if you want to know the real reason why these wars are happening, look at the money and see the real reasons. Thanks for this one, Sparky. We did hear Putin's reasons for invading Ukraine from the new media, such as Garland Nixon, the Duran, the Gray Zone, but the mainstream media didn't report it. Yep, true on that, Sparky. Thanks for this super chat, P. Smith. Tucker can just come through the southern border. Yeah, Tucker is big on the border stuff. That's part of where he's generally terrible, but that's another topic. Thanks for this one, Tars. When does it come out? I think he's talking about the Tucker interview with Putin, and we don't know. That's up to Tucker. I don't know if he gave a timeline, but not that I heard. But I'm sure it'll be soon. A lot of buzz around it. Thanks for this one, Sparky. Charlie Rose interviewed Bashar al-Assad and was Me Too not long after. Well, I mean, they certainly have been giving Tucker Carlson a hard time. And then we got one here on Rockfin. I want to make sure I catch. Just got to hit the right buttons here. Hit that one. I'll show it on there. Oop, that's not it. Sorry, just messing with the right buttons. There it goes. All right. Thanks for this tip comment on the Rockfins. JVB. Baba Wawa was Putin's puppet. I hear you. Thanks for that one. Yeah, and of course, just making the point that it was no big deal, back in the day when they would have interviews with foreign leaders, and some of them that we were even more than a little bit unfriendly with. And one other thing I wanted to highlight before we move on here is that I've been working on a new thing connected to the 11 demands that I'm just going to throw up here briefly. So if you go to 11demands.com, I got my usual thing here at the top about MCDS, but I'm working on a concept called the 11 Demands Collective. And the idea, it's more of a loose organization, it's and we'll see where it goes from here, but basically I'm calling it a gathering of individuals who have reached the inevitable conclusion that money and corruption are the root causes that drive all other issues. And the mission of the collective is to educate people on the deep corruption and the core problem, big money in politics, in the online world, be a constant presence with this message, and urge all streamer hosts and really anyone you run into to always identify the core problem of money. That's the core problem, and call for the solutions as outlined in demand number 1. And if you go into the site in the 11 demands, you'll see the demands of demand number 1 gets into solutions for the money. And that's things like public financing of campaigns, fixing the Constitution, banning big money lobbying. There are solutions out there, but we have to demand them. We have to be clear about it. And then in the real world, organize direct actions and protests and call out our so-called representatives as servants of the top 0.1% and demand real changes. And probably the biggest point in this that I want to put out there is this idea. Every discussion of any major issue should finish with the money, with MCDS, the money, corruption, demands, and solutions. If any of our issues, our big problems are coming up, and the discussion doesn't finish with the money, with MCDS, it's a missed opportunity. So in the end game is to reach a critical mass of people that are thinking this way and demanding an end to the corruption, and to make this a big, broad movement that's too big to ignore. So if you want to be a member of the collective, really all you got to do is just say you're a member of the 11 Demands Collective. It's not a formal thing. You don't get a card, but you will get our appreciation, my appreciation, and the if you're a member, the idea is that you keep in mind these ideas always take it back to the money and always take it back to MCDS is the concept. So there, you heard it here first.
That's right. And we are going to be heading on over to Call-In, and you guys will have to tell me how did my mic sound tonight, because this is my first time using this mic.
You want me to bring it up?
Let me go in here. So we're going to head.
Call-In page. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Let's use the call-in.
We'll head on over to Call-In, ladies and gents. Episode 151, Tucker and Putin, Killer Mike, Biden polls. And for some reason, I forgot to put something else there. Sorry about that. But let's chat, guys. Let's head on over to Call-In. That link is pinned to the top of the chat. If you have the app, you guys know how to do this. If you don't have the app, you can still use your laptop. All you got to do is just click on the link and you're there in the call-in room. Look forward to hearing from you guys. I do have a couple of interviews coming up this week. Cornel West, I'll be recording an interview with him tomorrow. That'll post Thursday afternoon. Jill Stein will be here Thursday evening, and Nico House will be here Friday night. He actually just got back from Egypt, and he has a lot to say in reference to how Egypt feels about this issue, this brutal assault from Israel on Gaza. So stay tuned for all of that. And I got a couple interviews I think that'll be lined up for next week as well. So I've been busy. Let's go ahead and head on over to Call-In, guys. Link is pinned to the top of the chat. Other than that, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.